Hi everyone and welcome back to another video. This video is a continuation on my series on individuals who were jailed for the offence of murder in England in a specific month of the year, looking in this video at November of 2025. As usual, I've selected 12 cases, this time involving 12 individuals who were jailed for the offence of murder. I'll go through what they did, the name of the victim or victims in the case, the sentence that they received, and then I'll try and pick out something noteworthy from the case, such as the judge's comments. Welcome to my channel, Andy on Crime, where I talk about high-profile criminal cases and other aspects of criminal law in England and Wales. And if you are on other social media platforms and you want to follow me, I am on TikTok. My handle is Andy on Crime1, and I'm also on Twitter or X, and my handle is Andy on Crime. If you do want to support my channel, then you become a member. Click the join button down below and get some exclusive perks. Or you can click the link up here and in the description and sign up with NordVPN, where you can get a huge discount on a range of their plans and you will be supporting my channel. So thank you. And then the final thing to say, and I say that in all of these videos, is that anyone convicted of the offence of murder in England and Wales is given a mandatory life sentence. The only question is how long the minimum term or tariff will be. That is the period that they will spend in prison in full before they are eligible to apply to the parole board to be released. It's only if they satisfy the parole board that they are no longer a danger to the public can they be released. If they don't meet that test, then they will remain in prison. If they are released, they'll be released on licence and could be subject to recall for breaches of that licence condition or if they commit any further offences. With all that being said, let's get into the video. At number 1 is Derek Martin, who was sentenced on the 6th of November. On the evening of the 9th of June 2023, Derek Martin walked into Brighton police station and told officers, "I've killed 2 people. Those 2 people were Chloe and Josh Bashford." Martin, who was 67, admitted to hitting Chloe with a hammer before stabbing her and then stabbing and strangling Josh. Martin had previously been married to Chloe's mother years before she was born and was considered a family friend. Following the killings, Martin then went and picked up Chloe and Josh's children from school as their parents lay dead in the house. Martin was often at the house where Chloe and Josh had 4 children, and he would help with odd jobs around the house. On the morning of the murders, Martin had helped with the school run and had even made Chloe breakfast. Having handed himself in to police that evening, he pleaded guilty to manslaughter by way of diminished responsibility, but was also charged with murder and stood trial. During his trial at Brighton Crown Court, the jury heard that Martin had told police he had had a row with Chloe about money that he stated that she owed him, becoming enraged, leading to the attack on Chloe. When Josh got home, he went upstairs and was then attacked by Martin, who stabbed him before placing a belt or a rope around his neck. Martin declined to give evidence during the trial. On the 24th of October 2025, the jury found him guilty of murder. At his sentencing on the 6th of November 2025, Martin was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 29 years. During sentencing, the judge remarked that the attacks were driven by rage and resentment, and that the murders have caused profound grief to Chloe and Josh's family. At number 2 is Hassan Jhangur, who was sentenced on the 6th of November. In December 2023, Hassan Jhangur, who was 25, killed Chris Marriott, who was 46, when he deliberately rammed his car into a crowd of people during a brawl at his sister's wedding reception in Sheffield. The incident took place in College Court in Sheffield amid escalating tensions between the Khan and Jhangur families over the marriage between Amani Jhangur and Hassan Khan. Earlier that day, after a family dispute, Ambreem and Nafisa Jhangur had gone to the Khan home, where an argument turned physical and left Nafisa laying unconscious in the road. Several neighbours, including Chris Marriott and Alison Norris, came across the scene and stopped to help. Emergency calls were made by both families as tensions continued to rise. Meanwhile, at the Jhangur home, Hassan Jhangur was told that his sister had been assaulted. He armed himself with a lock knife and drove to College Close and accelerated up the hill at speed. Seeing Risat Khan standing in the road in front of Nafisa and the other helpers, he deliberately drove into him before running over the group on the ground, trapping both Chris Marriott and Nafisa under the car and seriously injuring others. Chris Marriott suffered catastrophic injuries and died at the scene. Moments later, a chaotic fight erupted. As people rushed into the street, Hassan Jhangur briefly remained in his crashed vehicle before getting out and confronting members of the Khan family. Hassan Khan arrived carrying a baseball bat, and in the ensuing struggle, Hassan Jhangur stabbed him multiple times, causing serious injuries. The scene was crowded and volatile as both members of the family became involved. Shortly after the stabbing, Mohammed Jhangur, who was the father of Hassan, arrived in a taxi. Before police reached the scene, he took the knife from his son and hid it in his vehicle, though officers quickly recovered it. Emergency services worked to free those trapped under the car. And in addition to Chris Marriott's death, multiple victims, including Alison Norris, Risat Khan, Ambrim Jhangur and Nafisa Jhangur, sustained severe or life-threatening injuries. Jhangur was arrested and charged with murder, as well as a number of other offences. Following a trial, Jhangur was found guilty of murder, plus other offences of wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. On the 6th of November 2025, Hassan Jhangur was sentenced at Sheffield Crown Court to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 26 years. His father, Mohammed Jhangur, was separately convicted of the offence of perverting the course of justice and received a 6-month sentence of imprisonment, which was suspended for 2 years. At number 3 is Awad Abdul Samad, who was sentenced on the 13th of November. On the 4th of June 2024, Samad murdered Mohammed Abdi by stabbing him with a knife. 2 days prior to the murder, a man called Sufyan Shafi, known both to Samad and Mohammed, was kidnapped and tortured. Footage was posted on social media showing him naked and being humiliated. He was eventually released and went to hospital with injuries including a broken nose. Evidence suggested that Mohammed Abdi, the victim in this case, had been involved in that attack, and the attack also involved a black Porsche Cayenne. On the night of the 4th of June 2024, Samad and another individual called Mahmoud El Hazza were travelling in a Seat Leon with 2 other individuals. El Hazza pulled over near traffic lights, and a black Porsche Cayenne, thought by them to be connected with the earlier attack, stopped behind. Samad then got out of the Seat with a knife and began attacking the Porsche's front passenger window. The Porsche's driver, Mohammed Abdi, left his car armed, and there was a confrontation. During that confrontation, Samad stabbed him 3 times, one of which was fatal. El Hamza then drove them both away from the scene. They changed clothes, and El Hazza eventually fled the country, only returning after being deported, and was arrested. Samad tried to evade police and escape justice by travelling to a hospital in Luton, giving a fake name and being treated for the injuries that he sustained in the attack. During the trial, the pathologist gave detailed evidence of the fatal wound. Samad's knife blade had penetrated deeply through the ribs and into the heart of Mohammed. Having been found guilty of murder and possession of a bladed article following a trial, Samad was sentenced on the 13th of November 2025 to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 27 years. El Hazza was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment for attempting to pervert the course of justice. At number 4 is Romaine James, who was sentenced on the 17th of November. On the 12th of November 2024, just after midday, 23-year-old Seymour T. Kwashira was found unconscious with stab wounds to his neck and stomach at a flat in Winrose Avenue in Leeds. He later died in hospital. The culprit was 18-year-old Romaine James. James had attended the flat with 2 others and they'd been inhaling nitrous oxide. Seymour had been staying in the flat with a woman who lived there. Having consumed the laughing gas, an argument broke out between Seymour and James. That argument proved to be fatal for Seymour, as James stabbed him with a machete before leaving with the other 2 men. James was later captured on CCTV holding the machete. He was arrested and stood trial at Leeds Crown Court, where, on the 2nd of October 2025, he was found guilty of murder by the jury. And on the 17th of November 2025, James was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 24 years. At number 5 is Jakub Nowicki, who was sentenced on the 17th of November. On the 25th of April 2025, 40-year-old Jakub Nowicki murdered Tomasz Kopek. At approximately 6:45 a.m. on the 25th of April, police were called to a property in Grant Avenue in Slough following reports of a domestic assault. On arrival, a woman named Karolina Nowicka was found outside the address with visible injuries, including cuts and swelling to her lips and bloodstains on her clothing. Inside the property, officers discovered a man, later identified as Tomasz Kopek, lying on the living room floor with severe head injuries and surrounded by broken furniture. He was in a critical condition and was immediately taken to hospital by ambulance. Despite specialist treatment, Tomasz died from his injuries in hospital 2 days later on the 27th of April 2025. A post-mortem examination confirmed that his injuries were consistent with a prolonged assault involving multiple blows to the head. Karolina, who was 34 years old, sustained minor injuries and required minimal medical treatment and has since made a full recovery. Nowicki was arrested the same day and was charged the following day with murder, assault occasioning actual bodily harm, and criminal damage. He stood trial and was found guilty of all 3 offences. He was sentenced on the 17th of November 2025 at Reading Crown Court to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 19 years. The judge called the offence a cowardly attack and stated, "You have no remorse and seemingly little understanding of the enormity of your actions. It was clear from your evidence that you remain consumed by self-pity, anger and jealousy." At number 6 is Dante Forrest, who was sentenced on the 19th of November. On the 20th of September 2024, Marvin Dixon, who was 40 years old, was found dead in the home of Dante Forest. His body was discovered in a bathtub after police were informed of a dreadful smell coming from Forest's property by neighbours. The house was boarded up, padlocked and in complete darkness, with the police believing Marvin to have been dead for over 10 days. A post-mortem examination found Marvin had suffered multiple injuries, including fractures to his head and face and multiple stab wounds. The police watched hours of CCTV footage and saw Marvin with Dante Forest days before he was found. Marvin was last seen on CCTV footage collecting a pizza, which proved to be a decisive clue to his murder, leading to DNA evidence linking Forest to the crime. Forensic evidence revealed bloodstains were present on a shirt found inside the address and on the pizza box, which linked Forest to the murder. He was arrested on suspicion of murder and charged on the 25th of September. He was convicted following a trial at the Old Bailey, and on the 19th of November 2025, Forest was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 22 years. At number 7 is Jason Hale, who was sentenced on the 20th of November. On the morning of the 19th of September 2024, 42-year-old Sheldon Jameson was found with stab wounds in the Hyde Park area of Doncaster in Yorkshire. The culprit was 37-year-old Jason Hale. 2 days prior to the murder of Sheldon, Hale attacked another man in the same location and in the same circumstances, but fortunately he survived and went on to give evidence in the trial of Hale. After the murder, the police examined CCTV footage which showed Hale loitering around the alleyway where the attacks took place on the 17th and 19th of September. This led to Hale being dubbed the Lurker in the Shadows. Hale was arrested and charged with the murder of Sheldon, as well as the attempted robbery and wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm of the other unnamed individual. Hale's defence was that he was acting in self-defence on both occasions, accepting that he was the man shown in the CCTV footage. The jury rejected his defence and he was found guilty of the charges. On the 20th of November 2025, Hale was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 23 years. He was also given sentences of 8 years for the attempted robbery and 9 years for wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, to run concurrently to the life sentence. At number 8 is Craig Howse, who was sentenced on the 21st of November. On the evening of the 5th of March 2025, emergency services attended an address in Bolingbroke Street in the Heaton area of Newcastle, where they found 31-year-old Michael Craig, who had sustained serious head injuries. He was taken to hospital, but despite the efforts of medical staff, he died a short time later. Michael was a guest in Howse's flat when he was subjected to a horrific attack during which he suffered more than 30 knife wounds to his face and head. Exactly why Howse carried out such a ferocious attack is unclear. Following Michael's death, Northumbria police immediately launched an investigation, and officers arrested Howse on suspicion of the attempted murder a short time later. Following Michael's death, Howse was subsequently charged with murder. He denied the offence, but was found guilty by a jury following a 3-week trial at Newcastle Crown Court in September 2025. Howse began complaining and swearing when the verdict was announced, raising his voice and shouting expletives at the jury. On the 21st of November 2025, Howse was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 20 years. At number 9 is Martin Suter, who was sentenced on the 21st of November. In July 2023, Martin Suter murdered his ex-wife Anne Blackwood at Crofton Cemetery in Stubbington in Hampshire at the grave of their son on what would have been their son's 36th birthday. At around 15:45 on Monday the 24th of July 2023, police received a call from Suter stating that he had just murdered someone by stabbing them. He identified the victim as his ex-wife Anne Blackwood and stated that his motive was related to the death of their son, who had sadly taken his own life and for whom he blamed Anne. Officers rushed to the scene, and despite their efforts and those of paramedics from South Central Ambulance Service, Anne died at the cemetery. Suter was arrested and taken into custody. Following a charge for murder, Suter denied the offence, but 3 days into his subsequent trial on the 28th of May 2024, he changed his plea to guilty. His sentencing was adjourned until after the outcome of another case being heard at Bolton Crown Court, where he was acquitted by a jury of some charges relating to sexual offences. However, he admitted an indecent assault on a girl under the age of 14. Suter then tried to overturn his guilty plea for the murder of Anne Blackwood, but this application was rejected by the judge. On the 21st of November 2025, Suter was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 28 years. At number 10 is Zachariah Talbert-Young, who was sentenced on the 25th of November. Just before 11 p.m. on the 21st of July 2023, 19-year-old Eddie Cynthia was murdered in the Park area of Grosvenor Road in Bristol. He was stabbed in his left thigh, which severed an artery and caused unsurvivable blood loss. He was also stabbed multiple times elsewhere on his body. Zachariah Talbert-Young was one of 2 people who attacked Eddie. The other man has not been found. Talbert-Young arrived on a stolen e-bike with a mask, and police recovered CCTV footage showing 2 men arriving on a high-powered e-bike at the park where Eddie was stabbed. The images tracked the pair entering and leaving the scene, and investigators used that footage to trace the bike's movement back to a house in Easton. Alongside the CCTV, phone record data and other investigative work helped link the movements and timing of the attackers to Talbert-Young. Investigators worked methodically, reviewing camera footage across dozens of locations and cross-referencing it with mobile phone records and other evidence. Talbert-Young was arrested in August of 2023. He was found trying to board a ferry in Liverpool with a quantity of cash on him. He was subsequently released on police bail. Whilst on bail 6 months later, Talbert-Young and another man called Paul Elijah Hayden stabbed Nathan Williams, though thankfully he survived. Talbert-Young was eventually charged with the murder of Eddie and the attempted murder of Nathan, along with Paul Hayden. Having been found guilty of both offences, Talbert-Young was sentenced on the 25th of November 2025 to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 33 years for Eddie's murder and a minimum term of 20 years for the attempted murder of Nathan to run concurrently. Paul Hayden was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 18 years. At number 11 is Adam Wright, who was sentenced on the 28th of November. On the 23rd of December 2023, Adam Wright murdered his wife's 78-year-old grandmother, June Henty. June was getting ready to go Christmas shopping with her daughter when she received an impromptu visit from her granddaughter's husband, Adam Wright, of Bishop's Waltham in Hampshire. Wright attacked her more than 100 times to the head, face and neck with a knife after she refused his demands for money. June was later found by family members still alive and was taken to hospital, where she underwent major surgery and spent 90 days in intensive care. She was able to name Wright as her attacker at the scene to family members and to emergency responders, and he was arrested the same day. Wright was initially charged with attempted murder and pleaded guilty. Before he could be sentenced for the attempted murder of June, she died on the 14th of June 2024. The post-mortem examination concluded that June died as a direct result of the knife. Wright was subsequently charged with June's murder on the 6th of January 2025. He subsequently pleaded guilty on the 27th of February 2025 at Portsmouth Crown Court to June's murder. It's then unclear why there was a delay between February and November of 2025, but on the 28th of November 2025, Wright was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 24 years. At number 12 is Peter Augustine, who was sentenced on the 28th of November. On the evening of the 6th of May 2025, 87-year-old John Mackey made a routine trip from his flat to the Co-op on Seven Sisters Road, where he brought groceries and a newspaper before stopping at a takeaway for food. After placing his items carefully into his bag, he began walking home. Unbeknownst to him, Peter Augustine had been watching him from the outside of the takeaway. Augustine later claimed that he was simply hungry and considered stealing a kebab from the shop, although he abandoned that idea because the police were nearby. Instead, Augustine followed John for some distance, waiting until John had entered a secluded hedge-enclosed area of a nearby park. There, Augustine launched a violent attack. While no witnesses saw the beginning of the assault, they did observe Augustine repeatedly punching John with significant force, shouting, "Give me the bag," and at one point appearing to stamp on him. The brutality of the assault left John with extensive head, neck and body injuries, including rib fractures and a bleed on the brain. John sadly died 2 days later, on the 8th of May 2025. Following a trial at the Old Bailey, Augustine was found guilty of John's murder. During sentencing, the judge made reference to Augustine's behaviour during the trial, stating that he had repeatedly demonstrated an inability to control his anger. He refused to attend much of the hearing, and when he was present, he was disruptive, aggressive, and verbally abusive, to the point that the judge ultimately had to exclude him from the courtroom while he was giving evidence. On the 28th of November 2025, in the absence of Augustine, who refused to attend due to an alleged back injury, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 23 years and 203 days.